He literally walked into a dead end and never came out. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name is Philpott and I cover true crime cases on my channel. Today we're going to be looking at a very unusual case actually. A case that's boggled a lot of people's minds for over 4 years now. But before I get into that, as always, quick disclaimer, any of the information I provide during this video is just based off what I found on the internet, whether it's from articles, interviews, or accounts of people that are in some way connected to the case. So I do apologize if any of that information is incorrect. Can't always be sure, I'm afraid. But other than that, let's... Screaming children. Great. But other than that, let's get into today's case. So this is the case of Corrie McKeague, who seemingly vanished into thin air at the age of 23 after a night out with his friends in September 2016. So Corrie was born in September of 1993 in Perth, Scotland. When he was 9, his parents divorced, and that meant that he, his brothers, and his mum moved out, and they actually moved to another town. After Corrie's school years, he joined the Royal Air Force, or the RAF, in Honington, or Honington. Oh my god, there's so much I can't pronounce in this video already, I'm so sorry. And there he was an aircraft gunner. Corrie's mother, Nicola, described him as friendly, bubbly, confident, like he was so sociable and outgoing. Basically, a light for everyone who knew him. Also, at the time of his disappearance, he was seeing a girl called April Oliver, who... well, it basically wasn't a monogamous relationship on... If you're wondering what just happened, a bunch of... actually, I don't know how that happened, so it's really creepy. A load of markers just fell over onto the floor. Oh no. Let's try that again. At the time of his disappearance, he had been seeing a girl called April Oliver, and this basically wasn't a monogamous relationship on either part, really. They had been dating for like 5 months, but they both were on like Tinder and other dating apps and stuff, like one of those kind of situations. And on top of this, Corrie had a very active sex life. But it wasn't just active, it was colourful. There was a lot going on, a lot of different sexual situations and stuff. But to complicate things, at the time of his disappearance, April was actually pregnant, and she didn't even know it at the time. She didn't even find out until after she found out that he disappeared. And also at the time, she wasn't even in the UK, she was actually in the States. So she was like thousands of kilometers away, and who would end up being the father of her child had just disappeared, like vanished into thin air. Okay, so let's get into the actual disappearance. On Friday the 23rd of September 2016, Corrie had a night out with his friends. It was the kind of situation where initially he hadn't even planned on going out, so he was kind of stalling a little bit, but because of that he ended up missing the lift with them. But then he decided he'd go out anyway, so because of that he had to drive himself. So he was going from RAF Honington to Bury St Edmunds, which was a town a couple of kilometres away. He parked it in a car park and he paid for parking until 9 AM the following day. So it was around 10:10 when Corrie was in his car, but he rang his brother. And he was having the chats with his brother, and he was pre-drinking for like half an hour or so, and I'm guessing he was parked. I don't think he was actually driving and pre-drinking, although I actually don't know. So at about 10:50 PM then, he went to meet up with his friends in Sobar. They had a drink or two there, and then they moved on to Wetherspoons. Again, they had another drink or two in Wetherspoons, and then at 12:30 they moved on to Flex Nightclub. So because they all had the weekend off, they went pretty hard on the drinks. Particularly Corrie. He was really, really drunk. And I got to the point then when the manager of the club actually asked him, like, are you all good, or are you absolutely hammered? And Corrie's response was, yes, I love you. And then he stumbled away. So that's the kind of level we're talking about. From there, he went over to the bar, and for another 20 or 30 minutes, he was like chilling at the bar, honestly drawing a lot of attention to himself, being quite loud, and just making it very clear that he had a lot to drink. That was when the doorman came up to him and said, listen, I think it's time you go home. And Corrie didn't really put up a fight or anything. He was like, yeah, you're probably right. So he left. Now the thing here was he didn't actually let any of his friends know that he was leaving. He literally just left. But apparently because he was such a sociable person, like it was not all that unusual for him to just go off on his own on a night out, because naturally, he could have a conversation with anyone. And that's honestly the danger with nightclubs and stuff, is they are so overstimulating to all of your senses. Like you've got flashing lights, it's really loud, you've got people dancing everywhere, there's so many people around, everyone's drunk. It's like, how can you, sometimes, like, even having been in a nightclub totally sober, like you almost feel drunk just from the atmosphere or like the energy there. I don't know, it's like, it's a weird thing, but because of all this, it's really difficult to keep track of everyone sometimes. And we've seen it in a number of cases where someone maybe goes off on their own, they end up missing, or they end up murdered, or like, it's just really, it's a tough situation, especially when you're not fully in your senses. When I was in college, I always had this massive kind of anxiety about the journey home because until I knew I was safe when I got home, or like to my friend's house or wherever I was staying, but like in that journey so much can go wrong, and it's just like, I personally could never relax until I got home. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I'm just saying it can be dangerous. So some of Corrie's movements were caught on CCTV just as he left the club, and naturally the first place he went was a takeaway place. I believe it was called Pizza Mamma Mia, and he ordered like a lot of food. Again, naturally. And this was around 1:15 a.m. It wasn't until 3 a.m. then that he sent a text to one of his friends who, basically, the content of the text wasn't really that important. It was literally just like about a previous night out that they had had, but it's another part of the timeline that tells us he was still alive and all good at that point. But that's pretty much all we hear from him in that point of time. And after that, no more text. And the thing was, the night out was on the Friday, which was the 23rd. But Corrie wasn't reported missing until Monday, the 26th. And that was because, like I said, like, he wasn't working that weekend. He obviously had nowhere to be. Nobody was expecting him anywhere. And I'd say if you were one of his friends that he was out with that night, you probably just thought he was getting over the inevitable hangover that he would have had. But when he didn't show up to work on the Monday, that was weird. Corrie was never the kind of person that would just not show up to work, mainly because he absolutely loved his job. And straight away, everyone knew something's not right here. Like, it felt very off. So almost instantly when he was reported missing, there were massive search efforts with loads of volunteers, and they searched villages near the RAF base. They searched along the roads between Bury St Edmunds and Honington, where the base was, in case maybe he had tried to walk home or something like that. Although according to his mother, he had literally never done that before, like walked home. So there's that. But either way, they didn't find anything. So finally the police thought maybe they should look into more of the CCTV footage in the town, around Flex nightclub and in those streets, and maybe they could track Corrie's movements. And the CCTV actually tells a really unusual story. First of all, I'll just say there were 61 security cameras in the town, not including the ones that were privately owned by like residences or businesses, and they estimated that it was around 2,000 hours of CCTV footage to look through. And investigators went through all of it. So first off, like I said, you can see Corrie going into Pizza Mamma Mia and getting a load of food, and then he leaves and walks or stumbles down the street. At 1:20 a.m, you can see him walking down another street, and this is where he stops in front of an electrical shop called Hughes, and he sits down and eats his food. When he finished eating his food, he fell asleep there. I think he probably got to that point of the night where, like, it didn't matter where he was, it didn't matter that he was alone or anything, like he just needed to sleep. At one point, a passerby did, stop and tap him on the shoulder, kind of see if he was okay, but I'm guessing nothing ever really came of that, so I'm guessing he just said, yeah, I'm all good, thanks, and then, that was that. So at 3:24 a.m, so this is like 2 hours after he sits down there, he gets up and he walks towards this place that's known as the Horseshoe. Now, I don't think we have these in Ireland. I don't know if this is just a specific to that town thing or what, but it's basically one of those things where all of the businesses were around the outside, and then at the backs of the businesses, they had like all their industrial bins and stuff like that, and all the back doors of the businesses. That little area was called the Horseshoe. So Corrie was caught on CCTV and he walks into the Horseshoe, which obviously is a total dead end. It's not even a street. And what's really strange is he literally never comes out. That was literally the last time he was spotted on CCTV, was going into the Horseshoe. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second, because it was basically impossible to leave the Horseshoe without being seen by CCTV. Like, you literally would have to climb over the buildings or something to get out. And like, realistically, in his drunken and half passed out state, I would suggest that that's pretty impossible. The other option would be if he maybe walked through the businesses, like literally broke in through the backs of the businesses, walked the whole way through, and then left out the front door. But that doesn't really make sense either, because there was CCTV on the fronts of the businesses as well, so you know, he would have been seen there. And also, I'm guessing the doors would have been locked. You wouldn't have been able to get in, and even if they weren't locked, I'm guessing there would have been an alarm on. Surely there would have been some kind of alarm alert to the owners, or it just doesn't make sense. Like, he was not seen leaving the front of any of those businesses. He was not seen on their CCTV. That basically just didn't happen. So all in all, neither of those options seem any kind of possible to me. Also, on top of, like, if it was possible for him to literally climb over the building, he also would have gotten to the other side where there's CCTV, so that would have seen him as well. So like, no, it's not possible. So that last confirmed sighting of him was at like 3 in the morning, walking into a dead end. From there was absolutely nothing. All the searches they carried out, there was not a single sign of Corrie or any of his belongings or clothes or anything. And that's when police decided to look into his phone records, and you know, maybe they could figure out where his phone had pinged last. And it had pinged somewhere. So let's talk about that. So his phone had pinged at a cell tower in Barton Mills, which was like 13.1 miles away, or about 21 kilometers away from where Corrie was last seen in Bury St. Edmunds. And based off the pings from his phone, he had made it from Bury St. Edmunds, where he was last seen, to Barton Mills in like 28 minutes. So instantly it was clear, okay, he definitely didn't walk this. He was surely in a vehicle of some sort. Or at least his phone was in a vehicle of some sort. And his phone had stopped transmitting a signal at about 8 a.m. So it had either been turned off, or maybe run out of battery, which is definitely possible after a night out, or it was destroyed. But that last signal from his phone actually came from a landfill in Barton Mills. A landfill. That's interesting, because in the Horseshoe, well, wasn't it all the industrial bins for the businesses in the town? And honestly, when I heard that at first, I was like, okay, case closed. It's pretty obvious what happened here. But there's honestly a bit more to it. Now, the CCTV from the entrance of the Horseshoe did actually catch a rubbish truck going in and emptying bins that morning, the next morning, I should say. And then they checked the rubbish truck's route, and it literally lined up exactly with where Corrie's phone had last pinged. Like, it got there at the exact same time. The timelines matched perfectly. So naturally, this brought about the theory that maybe Corrie had fallen asleep in one of these big industrial bins when he was really drunk, and then the following morning when the truck came to empty the bin, he was still passed out and the truck had emptied the contents of the bin, which would inevitably crush Corrie to death. And all that before bringing him to the landfill without the bin men knowing anything. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. I mean, apparently he had fallen asleep in bins or on bins before, so like after nights out and stuff, which, yeah, I guess if stranger things have happened. But according to his mom, Nicola, she says, well, she doesn't really get this, because she thinks, well, why was he asleep in the doorway of Hugh's for 2 hours and then he gets up and walks straight over to the Horseshoe and gets into a bin? Like, why would he change his sleeping location? And experts haven't exactly been able to answer that question, but I honestly just feel like it was September in England at 3 a.m. Like, it was going to be pretty cold. And I wouldn't be surprised, because there were a couple of like smaller streets that he'd been on. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of draft in the place that he was originally sleeping, and then he just thought, oh god, I need to get away from this cold or this draft. And you know, it's obviously going to be a little warmer inside a bin, like a big industrial bin, than just out in the open. I definitely don't think it's ridiculous to consider the fact that maybe he just wanted to get away from the cold, but like, as far as I've seen, no one really considers that possible. I don't know, I feel like that's very possible. Like, again, I'm not saying it's the smartest idea or anything, but he was really drunk. This is after a night out on the town. Your decisions are not always the smartest decisions. But anyway, I know you're probably wondering what I was talking about with the whole there's more to this thing. So let's get into that now. So the thing with the rubbish trucks is they actually had weighing devices. So the authorities decided to check the weight of the bin's contents on the day that Corrie disappeared, you know, to see if it had been particularly heavy or anything. And normally the contents of the bin would be around 20 to 30 kilos. So, you know, it would be pretty obvious if there was a whole human body in there. But the weight that day actually came back as 15 kilos, or if you go by pounds, 33 pounds. So, I mean, it's pretty impossible for a fully grown man who, also was full of alcohol and takeaway food, you know, that's going to add some extra weight, to be in there, as well as all the rubbish from that day. So because of this, the authorities kind of shrugged off the possibility of him having been in one of the bins. And this just leaves a massive question mark, because like, he literally walked into a dead end and never came out. And the only thing that crossed my mind at the start was, well, he must have gone into one of the bins, and you know, his phone was at the landfill, and that all makes so much sense, but the weight doesn't add up to that at all. But because of this, the police started to look into other possibilities, because they didn't believe at all that Corrie was in the landfill. Another thing they looked at from the CCTV was the fact that there were other people in the CCTV footage from this time and place. So they tried to identify some of these people. So they'd started off with 39 people who could potentially have seen or heard something. But I mean, CCTV footage can often be pretty blurry, and it was really difficult to actually identify these people. So 23 of them couldn't be identified, and that's when the authorities reached out to the public and said, like, hey, if you were in this area at the time, like, is this you, you know, that kind of thing. And that was really helpful, because I actually identified 13 more people, but no good information or actual leads even came from this at all. Nobody saw anything. Although at one point there was a sighting behind a sugar factory at 4:20 p.m. and this was in Bury St. Edmunds, and someone believed that they had seen Corrie. But unfortunately, police had looked into this and it wasn't him. There are just dead ends everywhere in this case, literally and figuratively. But all I'm gonna say is there is a massive twist coming up in the next few minutes, which totally throws everything for a loop. So then the police started looking into the possibility that maybe someone had picked Corrie up in a car from the Horseshoe, because there had been like 5 cars that had pulled into the Horseshoe in the hours after Corrie walked in there. Technically, Corrie could have been in any of these cars. Also, apparently Corrie was the type of person to either get in a car with someone or offer someone a lift. Like, because he was that sociable type of person, like he was confident, like he would do that. So maybe that's how he got out of the Horseshoe as opposed to walking. According to his mother Nicola, this definitely could have happened. So whether it was the type of thing where he had seen someone drive in there and asked them for a lift, or maybe he had intentionally gone and met up with someone, maybe from one of the dating apps that he had had. We know that he had been using Tinder and Plenty of Fish, and he also had a Grindr account, a joint account with April on some swingers website, as well as an account on a swingers website on his own, where he had said he was looking for lesbian couples, straight couples, and single women between the ages of 16 and 18, which is pretty young, although the age of consent in the UK is 16 years old. So with this theory of Corrie potentially getting into someone's car, authorities got a sniffer dog to try and track Corrie's scent. And this dog did actually pick up a scent. It basically traced it out of the Horseshoe and down the road towards Tesco, at which point it lost it for a little bit, but then it picked it up again and it started heading up the A134. They did search the A134, but again, no joy. But then there was some uncertainty about how reliable this particular dog was in relation to its sniffing ability. Sorry, I don't really know how to explain that. Okay, now for the twist. An arrest was made at one point of a man for perverting the course of justice. And this was because he had incorrectly reported the weight of the rubbish truck that day, the day that it could potentially have had Corrie in it. So we thought that the weight of the truck was 15 kilos, in which case totally impossible that a fully grown man would have been in there, when in actual fact the weight of the contents of the truck was 116 kilos, which for the Americans and people who use pounds is 255 pounds. Now that's interesting, because that is exceptionally heavy, considering, like I said, it was normally 20 to 30 kilos of rubbish. So there was an extra like 85 to 95 kilos in there. And guess what? Corrie was 85 kilos. So a decent chunk of time had passed between Corrie going missing and them actually realizing that the weight of the rubbish truck was a lot higher than what they originally thought. And that's probably the most unfortunate thing about this case, because there were now about 4.5 months of rubbish thrown on top of the rubbish that had already been there in the landfill. Now, they did eventually let this guy go who had been arrested, because apparently it was a genuine, honest mistake. But it's just a really unfortunate time and place to make a mistake like that. On top of this, though, something to mention, it is also possible that the weight itself was like really inaccurate, because sometimes on these weighing devices on the trucks, like, they would just throw like mad numbers out there. Like there was one occasion where it was over 1,000 kilos or something, which is ridiculous. Like you could never fit 1,000 kilos of rubbish in one of these trucks. So that just tells us that maybe the 116 kilos was just an inaccurate reading anyway. But I do believe that the likelihood of that was quite small. It's just important to be aware of these kind of things. So Nicola, Corrie's mother, was honestly really unhappy with how the investigation was carried out. She honestly thought, there were so many leads that the police just either disregarded or totally ignored, and she had to push for them to look into certain leads. Like, she literally had to beg for them to look into certain leads that could very well have been linked to Corrie's disappearance. So by December 2016, the amount of searches that had taken place and the amount of manpower that had gone into it and money, and there had been a lot of searches and they had turned up no results whatsoever. So they actually ended up calling the searches off. But what I will say is they hadn't actually searched the landfill at this point. They had searched Barton Mills, just not the actual landfill, and they had searched like near the RAF base. They'd searched Bury St. Edmunds and the actual place he went missing, and a lot of the roads in the area and all that, but no, they had no results. What's amazing is the public actually raised £50,000 as an incentive for anyone with information to come forward. So this acted as a reward, but honestly, Nicole was so fed up with how the investigation was going. She was actually threatening to withdraw the reward money, and she was threatening the police and saying that, I'm going to go and get a private investigator because you're not doing your job right, kind of thing. From here, Nicola threatened publicly to withdraw the reward money in the hopes that it would, put the skids under anyone who did have information to come forward, like ASAP. But this, again, led to absolutely nothing. And she actually eventually did withdraw the reward money. However, after a while, she put it back up. One of the leads that Nicola wanted the police to look into was actually about 3 men who had been seen burning a car in the local area soon after Corrie's disappearance. And considering the fact that it was definitely possible that Corrie had gotten a lift with someone, she thought this was genuinely a decent lead and something that could very possibly have happened. But the police, refused to look into it. They were like, no, that's not it. And she literally, like I said, she had to beg them to look into it. Luckily, eventually they did, but again, this turned up no results. They actually had nothing to do with Corrie's disappearance. Another lead that she really wanted them to look into was, on the 10th of October, a suitcase was found off the A628 road, and inside the suitcase was a burnt and dismembered body. So this was near Tintwistle in Derbyshire. And honestly, initially there were a good few people that were thinking this could be Corrie. Initial police investigations found that this was a white male under the age of 50, so still could have been Corrie. However, DNA analysis proved that it wasn't Corrie. And not that it's anything to do with this case, but you guys might also be curious as to what this whole body situation was about, what that case was about. And Just purely out of curiosity, I looked it up and whoa. It actually ended up being a situation where the victim was quite a rich, wealthy man, and his friend was a gambler. So his gambler friend murdered him so that he could assume his identity and take all his money and go on a gambling spree. Again, nothing to do with Corrie's disappearance, but I just thought that was really interesting and I was just really curious, to be honest. So finally, in February 2017, authorities searched the landfill. And I'm glad they did and all, but this is 4.5 months after Corrie disappeared. Like, why wait that long? I actually don't know when they found out about the weight of the truck, so I'm not sure if they literally went and searched the landfill straight away when they found out, or if they'd known about it for a while and then waited more. But considering how unhappy Nicola was with the investigation, I'm guessing it wasn't like straight away, but I honestly don't know. But unfortunately, because it had been so long, they literally had to look through 9,400 tons of waste in the landfill. And this obviously took months, but at one point they did find receipts from the day and location that Corrie went missing. Look who came to say hi. Sandy? Hi. Oh. So in a way this was good, right? Because they were at the pile of rubbish that came from the exact time and place that Corrie went missing from. But again, no direct link to Corrie. The only real thing they did find from the landfill was the back of a phone. Now, this could potentially have been from Corrie's phone, but unfortunately there was no SIM card or, anything that you could extract data from. Like, there was no way to turn the phone on. It was literally just a plastic part at the back of the phone. So again, nothing could come from that either. So unfortunately, even with those potential leads, they ended up calling off the searches in July of 2017. According to experts, though, if Corrie's body had been crushed in the rubbish truck, the rate of decomposition would have been much faster than normal, as well as the fact that there was a strong possibility that there had been cross-contamination with other human DNA. Now, at one point, authorities were made aware of the fact that some of the waste had been brought to an incinerator before being brought to the landfill, and apparently one of the workers had found what looked like bones in one of the incinerators. So for a brief moment in time, it looked like maybe there could be answers in this case. But unfortunately, they ended up being animal bones and still no answers. Also, before I move on, there had been a potential sighting of Corrie in the Barton Mills area at 4:30 a.m. on the night of his disappearance. Apparently, this delivery truck driver saw a guy who he now thinks was Corrie literally running straight across the road right in front of him, and he says the guy was not dressed for how cold it was, and also that the guy was running directly towards a place that was a known swinger meetup spot. But as far as I'm aware, police have never actually investigated that statement. Alright, so something else that Nicola had also really been unsatisfied with was the fact that originally she had been told the police had looked through all of the CCTV footage right up until 4 p.m. on the Saturday, the day after Corrie's night out and disappearance. And it was months later, maybe even over a year, that she found out that they didn't look up until 4 p.m. They only looked up until 12 p.m. that day. So if Corrie had slept in one of those bins or even slept on the ground or, leaning against a wall or something like that and woke up anytime after 12 and just walked straight out of the Horseshoe, they wouldn't know. Like, he was obviously up really late. The last time we see him being awake is 3:30 in the morning. He was probably very tired. Sometimes after drinking, you can sleep till all hours. Like, who knows what time he actually would have woken up. So technically, he literally could have just walked straight out of there. And if that is the case, well then there is a whole hoax of things that could have happened. Unfortunately, Nicola does believe that her son is dead. She just doesn't know how or what happened. But she doesn't really buy into the whole landfill theory. Corrie's father, on the other hand, does believe that Corrie's body is somewhere in the waste disposal system, and authorities believe this as well. But after so much time and there being no answers, police did pass this case on to the cold case unit. And that leads us right up until, November 2020, literally only 2 months ago. So in November 2020, it was announced that there would be a full inquest into the death of Corrie McKeague. And I say death because that's actually how they referred to it, not the disappearance, but the death of him. And this was after a request to do so by the family. So they're expecting a full hearing in 2021 about this. So I'll let you guys know if there's any updates on that. But before I go, let's just have a look at all of the theories, because I actually haven't even mentioned all of them. First off, obviously the main theory in this case is that Corrie's body is somewhere in the waste disposal system. This is probably the strongest theory in this case because he walked into a dead end and the only thing that was in this dead end were industrial bins, and a lorry came that next morning and emptied those bins, and Corrie's phone literally made it from Bury St Edmunds to Barton Mills at a landfill in less than 28 minutes, and it went the exact same route as that lorry. And that's without me even mentioning the weight of the lorry, that it was basically a whole human male heavier than normal. So very strong argument for that theory. I've also briefly mentioned the fact that he could have been kidnapped because there were a number of cars that went into the Horseshoe and left in the hours after Corrie walked in there and never walked out. And kind of a sub theory of that is that Corrie was lured in by someone from a dating app, whether it was someone that was genuinely just not a good person that you couldn't trust online, or maybe someone was pretending to be someone they weren't, or maybe he'd been texting someone who was already in a relationship. But all of those accounts that I told you about on his dating apps and, you know, swingers websites and all this stuff, they were all deleted before authorities could even have a look at them. So that detail I kind of find really unusual. Like, did he delete them himself, or did someone else access his phone and delete all those accounts? Weird. I don't know. Another theory is that he left on his own accord. And this, I mean, anyone that knew him says there's no way he did this. Like, some people literally think that he planned absolutely everything, but then I'm like, why walk straight into a dead end where it's like really awkward to get out without being seen? Or but then maybe he planned for one of those cars to come pick him up and drop him off somewhere, or I don't know. But then, like, he was literally never seen again by anyone or any cameras, or like, you know, he wasn't checking into any hotels, or it's like he vanished into thin air. Also, if you planned that, why get so drunk, you know? Or maybe he was faking how drunk he was, but then like, why add that extra layer? It doesn't really seem that likely to me. And then there's also the fact that he had future plans. Like, he was planning to go to Scotland for Halloween. He had a 7-month-old puppy in his own bedroom. Like, why would he just leave his puppy alone forever? And his credit cards showed nothing that was planned. His emails showed nothing that was planned. Again, his social media showed nothing that was planned. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, the fact that he loved his job. Why would he just leave? And then, how could he physically have done it? He walked into a dead end and was never seen walking back out. Unless he waited until after 12 p.m. that day when the authorities didn't look at that footage. I don't know, honestly. The final theory, though, which is kind of similar to that, is that he took his own life. According to his dad, he had struggled with depressive episodes in the past, and maybe there was something that had triggered that for him. You know, maybe he did actually know about his girlfriend's pregnancy and he just was not ready for that kind of thing. You know, based off all of the dating profiles he had, it didn't really seem like he was in a place where he was ready to settle down and become a father. So that could have been something that really set him off. There were several people that came forward saying he 100% knew about the pregnancy. But then there were several people that came forward saying that he 100% did not know. Nobody can truly know. So that brings me to the end of this case. I would love to know what you guys honestly think happened to Corrie McKeague. This is a really unusual case. Like, I've never really seen anything like it before. Also, I want to thank Laura for requesting this. Thank you so much, Laura. And yeah, honestly, if I had to give an opinion, I genuinely do agree with his father and the authorities that his body is somewhere in the landfill. It just seems too, like, how could there be so much of a coincidence that he goes into a dead end where all there is bins, and then his phone ends up going straight to a landfill. It gets destroyed. It's probably crushed itself. And, you know, there was also a lorry scene, and then the weight of the lorry, it doesn't seem likely that it wasn't that. But then, like, how have they not found his body? But, well, there were 4.5 months between even, oh my god. Oh my god. Sorry. God! There was a bird outside, like jumping around, flapping at the window. So I have no idea what I was saying now. Oh yeah, there was 4.5 months between him going missing and them even beginning to look through the landfill. So, but anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like and comment down below what your thoughts were, as well as the fact that it really helps me with the algorithm. You know, just if you want to support. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at KatePhilpott_YT. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.